Protected behind its Great Wall, the Middle Kingdom, 3,000 years old, felt it would always be safe from invaders. Though it did not take into account the hordes of nomadic horsemen bearing down on it from the Mongolian steppes, led by Kublai Khan. Kublai Khan was the grandson of Genghis Khan, who had already imposed his law from the Mediterranean to the Pacific. The Mongolian Empire would be the most extensive empire ever known, and the only one to conquer China. Shimabara, in the province of Nagasaki in southern Japan. In a temple, an international scientific team is examining a map unique in the world. It measures 2 meters 20 by 2 meters 80 and represents the Eurasian continent. Entitled An Exhaustive Map of the World and the Capitals of the Nations, it was drawn at the beginning of the 14th century AD, according to a map dating back to the time of the Mongolian Empire. From the middle of the 12th century, the Chinese had developed the technique of engraving maps on stone. The Japanese archipelago can be seen at the eastern extremity. The names of the different Japanese provinces are indicated with remarkable precision. Kyoto, then the capital of Japan, is shown in red. In the center, China can be seen represented in exaggerated proportions, as the Chinese knew more about it than they did the rest of the world. India is represented by its seacoasts, probably because sailors had described it to the Chinese. To the west of India, Baghdad, the leading city of the Muslim world, is represented. And further west still is Europe. With Marseille, then one of the main ports for Mediterranean trade, and Seville in Spain. For the first time on an ancient map, the African continent can be seen, showing the entire course of the Nile right from its source. This depiction of Africa does not seem to result from direct knowledge, but was probably based on oral traditions gleaned from Chinese sailors who sailed around the Indian Ocean up to the Persian Gulf and the coasts of Arabia. At the same time, Westerners who had traveled to the east were unaware of the geography of Africa. According to Professor Li Xiaosong, this map provides the key to understanding the Mongolian conception of the way in which the world was organized.
"混一"这个名字是在中国的元朝，就是蒙元时期第一次开始用这个混一图。我想混一呢是反映了一种，那么我们说这样一个局面是忽必烈所开创的。混一实际上表现的是一种亚洲、欧洲、欧亚大陆和非洲的这样一个大的一个地理视野。那么在这个地图上，我觉得他用这样一种地理空间一种地图的形式，就把他自己的一种远大的思想抱负能够表现出来。
The man who would realize the ancestral dreams of the nomads, the great Kublai Khan, was born in 1214 in the middle of the Great Mongolian Steppes in northeastern Asia. He probably grew up under a yurt, a traditional felt tent in Ulaanbaatar, the present-day capital of Mongolia. Each year it hosts a festival of Mongolian arts. The high point of the event is a 30-kilometer horse race along the steppes. This competition is reserved for children. Accustomed to riding from an early age, the young Mongolians are exceptional riders. It was Genghis Khan, the founder of the Mongolian Empire, who started these tournaments for his warriors. With 30,000 horsemen, he took Eurasia by storm in 1205 and seized a territory stretching from northern China to eastern Turkey. The Mongolians certainly razed cities to the ground and transformed fields into pasture for their horses. Genghis Khan undoubtedly left behind him a reputation for cruelty. This was probably due to the harshness of the nomadic lands. A strategist and politician, the man embodied 12 centuries of invasions by sedentary civilizations. Genghis Khan congratulates his grandson, the young Kublai, at the end of his first hunt. He would wait until the age of 46 to inherit part of his grandfather's empire, the northern half of China. The date was the 4th of June, 1260. He may have been inspired at that time by the words of the great Conqueror. In 7 years, I have realized great work. In all 6 directions, everything is under a single rule. Kublai Khan's great plan would be to conquer the rest of China. However, China was more than an empire. Kublai Khan knew that it was incomparable. It had existed in isolation since its beginning 3,000 years previously. Its great imperial dynasties are lost in the mists of time. The Zhou dynasty appeared in the first millennium BC. The Xin dynasty that followed isolated China even more from the rest of the world by starting to build the Great Wall. Foreign influence would only penetrate the Middle Kingdom extremely sparingly. In its isolation, and maybe because of it, China developed an eminently land-based civilization, similar to that of ancient Egypt. The civilization was original and universal in all aspects. It encompassed wisdom, aesthetics, and humanism. There was a Chinese miracle, just as there was a Greek miracle. Only Buddhism, which arrived from India via the caravans, would encroach on this cultural and political insularity. It would become the third philosophy after Confucianism and Taoism, which were purely Chinese. It was therefore more than an empire that Kublai Khan coveted and wanted to subdue. It was a civilization. He came closer to this goal by ordering the building of an immense palace at Daidu. He decided to make it his capital. The advantage of its location was that it was right in the center of North China, the area he controlled, and far from his enemies, the Song, in the south. It was an eminently political gesture. It conveyed his desire to follow in the wake of some 22 Chinese dynasties. Xu Pingfang, an archaeologist, has been researching Daidu for 30 years.
He 认为呢，他应当从蒙古草原向南方，就是到中国的广大的汉族的地区。 到大都开始兴建大都城，以大都作为他统治中国的首都。
He ostentatiously endorsed the customs of the Chinese emperors and adopted their ceremonial ways. This reconstruction of Daidu, using synthesized imaging based on the excavations carried out by Professor Xu Pingfang, shows that the imperial palace of the Forbidden City, where the Great Khan lived, was located outside the area occupied by the imperial administration. The most characteristic place, the one where the emperor resided, was the Great Hall, and was an extremely large building, designed in a traditional Chinese style. The tiles were decorated with dragons, a symbol of the Chinese emperors, the sons of heaven. By building this palace, Kublai Khan abandoned forever the customs of the steppes. He would never return to his native Mongolia. However, yurts, the felt tents under which he had lived for a long time, permanently stood in the gardens of the palace. They were used for the Mongolian princes who came to visit him. In 1275, a Venetian merchant passing through Daidu asked to be received by Kublai Khan. His name, Marco Polo. In his memoirs, the traveller recounted the tale of his reception at the palace of Kublai Khan and described the splendour of the court. He described the city which he called Khanbalik, that is, City of Khan. It was surrounded by over 200 other cities which were quite close, from which merchants would come to sell and purchase goods. He noted that religions coexisted peacefully and that all were free to practice their religion as they wished. Along with Kublai Khan, many of the Mongolian aristocrats were Buddhists. Many Mongolians, taught by priests of Persian origin, embraced Christianity, such as Genghis Khan's wife and mother. Many Arab and Persian sailors and merchants lived together in the Muslim quarters. The Venetian merchant witnessed that Kublai Khan made a special effort to attend the main ceremonies of each of the religions practiced in the empire. Fascinated, he related that at the Chinese New Year, Kublai Khan hosted a grandiose ceremony in his palace. With his own eyes, he saw governors from all the provinces of the empire offer gold, silver, pearls, gems, and superb white fabric to the great Khan. With wonder, he discovered a kingdom that managed to harmoniously integrate people of such different origins and religions. He entered China in 1275 via the caravan routes. He would leave 16 years later by boat. He would never forget the Middle Kingdom. Kublai Khan started conquering the territories defended by the southern Song emperors, the legitimate heirs to the Middle Kingdom. Although reduced by half, the power of the Song was still considerable. Behind the Blue River, the Yangtze-Jiang, they resisted. However, Kublai Khan was determined. He concentrated his forces on the two largest enemy towns, Fangcheng and Xiangyang. Xiangyang, supposedly impregnable, was protected by a fortress and a 450-meter-wide ditch. It was defended by resolute generals. Kublai Khan sent 100,000 men to lay siege and starve the city. 2 attempts to starve the city failed, but the besieged still resisted. The siege dragged on. To end it, Arik Kaya, one of Kublai Khan's Mongolian captains, brought 2 well-known Muslim engineers from Mesopotamia, Aladdin from Moselle and Ismail from Hilla. They ended the resistance of the besieged using war machines unknown in the region. These machines of war included the catapult. It had been brought to the Middle East by the Crusaders before passing into the hands of Kublai Khan. This one has been reconstructed in Denmark by Professor Peter Vemming Hansen, according to European and Middle Eastern documents. It operated according to a lever principle. A counterweight was raised using hoists. When falling back, the counterweight threw a cannonball held by ropes to the end of the mast. Throwing 15-meter cannonballs required 4 tons of stones as a counterweight. By modifying the counterweight, the range of the projectile could be adjusted. In this experiment, the stone was thrown 600 meters, a distance longer than the width of the ditch in Xiangyang.
Belejringer i middelalderen, de kunne vare op til 1 år. Og det var jo ikke bare én maskine, der stod. Der kunne stå en 10-20 stykker og smide ting og sager ind i hovedet på folk i en belejret by. Sådan en maskine der, den skyder hver 10. minut. Det vil sige, og den kan skyde i døgndrift. Det er bare et spørgsmål at have med ammunition og folk nok. Så inde i en belejret by havde man slet ikke ro. Det var ikke bare stenkugler, der blev smidt ind i hovedet på dem. Det var til fangetagende fjender og spioner. Det var døde dyr for at sprede sol og sygdom. Det var tønder med bajer og olie, som kunne antændes. Det var bikuber. Alskens ondskab blev smidt ind i hovedet på folk. Man har sågar hørt om tønder med skorpioner og slanger, der er smidt.
The weakness of Emperor Song and rival factions in his court were the reason behind the Chinese defeat. The war machines merely precipitated the outcome. As the military commander responsible for the defense of Xiangyang and weary of the intrigues of the court, handed the city to the Mongols. It was 1273. Xiangyang fell after a siege lasting 5 years. Its last defenders took refuge on a fleet that would be destroyed near Canton by a Mongolian squadron on the 3rd of April 1279. After taking Xiangyang, Kublai Khan became the sole master of the Middle Kingdom. The victory marked the arrival of the Mongolian Yuan dynasty, which for 1 century would follow in the steps of the Chinese dynasties. In the meantime, Kublai Khan had annexed Yunnan. This rich province, also known as Dali, is located on a plateau in the southwest of China. Before being conquered by Kublai Khan, it was a kingdom. He decided to establish an economic center there, from where he would develop his empire. In front of this gate, in the ramparts, its king surrendered to Kublai Khan without a struggle, and was kept on the throne. It was not by chance that he chose Dali as an economic center. He knew that some of the largest silver mines in China were to be found underground. Still exploited today, they produce silver that is worked by craftsmen in the region. These deposits enabled Kublai Khan to create a new currency. He knew that controlling the currency was an essential element of sovereignty. This silver object was actually a coin, a Ma-Ti yin, which means silver horseshoe, a name given due to its shape, reminiscent of a horse's hoof. It weighs approximately 2 kilos. It was the heaviest coin minted in the empire and was used for large transactions. This rare document, relating to the circulation of these coins as far away as in the Italian cities of the period, has been preserved in Florence, Italy. It mentions the word Balish, the Mongolian name given to the Ma-Ti yin coins. With the Balish, the document states, it is easy to purchase many products, such as oriental silk and all kinds of spices. As soon as it entered into circulation, it was used throughout the empire, strengthening the power of the great Khan. Sayyid Ajal, a Muslim from Bukhara, was laid to rest in the Yunnan province. Kublai Khan made him his Minister for Finance and the governor of the Dali region. He was the person who inspired the Mongolian sovereign to carry out a major economic reform: money-paper parity. Near Dali, the inhabitants of the Sanjia village are the descendants of Sayyid Ajal. They belong to the Ma Chinese Muslim community. The origins of the community are vouched for in a document preserved by its most senior member, Mr. Ma Yonggu.
这是我们祖先传留下来的家谱，是很贵重的东西，所以我把它装在箱子里边。
It starts with Muhammad, the founder of Islam, and stretches to the 56th generation, Mr. Ma Yonggu's generation.
从穆罕默德起，到了31世，是我们的祖先叫赛典车，他有5个儿子，我们是第5个儿子的后代，就是马苏。
Sayyid Ajal remains present in the memory of the villagers.
又立了很多的功绩，开通了团结了各民族，开通了这些产马大道，修建了金矿银矿，对国家有很大的贡献，对赛典是我们的祖先，我们是感到很荣幸的，我们是他的后代。
Kublai Khan gathered round him his advisors, ministers and companions, representing all the ethnic groups of his empire. Whenever he went hunting, he was accompanied by a Persian with a beard and a black man from Africa. The success of the Mongolian leader was mainly due to the fact that he adopted a policy of integration and tolerance with regard to all the people in his empire.
忽必烈因为他能够有一种多元文化、多元民族，大家一起来治理国家的这样一种思想，使得他就推动了这个元朝的时候的多民族或各个民族之间的这种经济文化的交流。
China, Turkmenistan, Persia and Russia were now united in a single empire under the authority of the Mongolian princes. For the first time in its history, the Middle Kingdom opened up to the outside and had direct links with Persia and the West. To ensure the safety of the caravans, the Mongolians opened the 2 transcontinental routes that had been closed since the end of antiquity. European travelers could now take the southern route through Persia to the Jade Gate, or the northern route from the Crimea through southern Siberia to reach China from the north. Large Muslim colonies developed in the main ports of southern China.
这些都是泉州古代伊斯兰教的石木干，基本上都是元朝的。当时元朝，阿拉伯世界来到泉州的有1万多人。
These Muslims were Persian and Arab commercial agents who lived in the coastal cities of China.
那就是伊斯兰教的石木干。
The empire, now linked by land and sea to all of Eurasia, cemented its position as the center of the world. It took nomadic horsemen from the steppes 70 years to realize the dream of Alexander the Great, to unite the East and the West. From the East to the West, the whole world belongs to us. It was then that he ordered his scholars to gather all maps of the world together and combine them all in one single map, which they did. This map suggests the existence of a major trade and communications network throughout an empire dotted with caravanserais. The imperial post alone maintained over 200,000 horses.
因而我们说，通过这张地图，我们看到了忽必烈的思想，我们看到了忽必烈的世界观，那么也是通过忽必烈的时代，使中华民族走向了更广阔的文明之路。
Oddly, it would be a foreigner to the Middle Kingdom, Kublai Khan the Mongolian, who would open it up to the world. Goods and ideas had never circulated so easily and on such a widespread level. Transport by caravan became much more organized and developed further than ever before. In spring and autumn, convoys of up to 5,000 camels left China, escorted by over 1,000 caravaneers. The caravans were loaded with tea, silk and porcelain. On the return route, they carried perfume and gems from India and silverware from Persia. Trading Chinese porcelain for Mediterranean coral took up to 2 years. Buddhism experienced a new momentum. The essential Buddhist texts were distributed via a land network, whose influence under Kublai Khan largely exceeded the borders of the empire. The map also revealed that the horseman from the steppes had maritime ambitions. He twice attempted to conquer Japan, chartering hundreds of boats carrying 165,000 soldiers.
因此，在这张图上呢，从非洲的沿海一到阿拉伯半岛，一直到这个南亚次大陆啊，到中国的这个东南沿海，到广东，到福建、浙江、江苏、山东这样的沿海画的都很详细。水为什么这么突出的表现？可能是反映了元朝对于沿着河流能够行船的这样一种水上道路的一种重视。像这是这张图的水为什么会占这么多？
Even the shallow waters are indicated, essential information for navigating safely. From Guangzhou, the main port on the eastern coast of China, hundreds of junks cleaved through the Chinese Sea to the Indo-Chinese coast. Passing the Malacca Strait, confronting the Gulf of Bengal and reaching India. Before getting to the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea and Egypt. In all the ports of the empire, a maritime authority was responsible for overseeing imports and exports. For each boat that left India for the Mediterranean, 100 left for China. To energize the maritime economy, Kublai Khan introduced an original financial system that permitted merchants to borrow boats and capital from the empire. In return, they would pay 70% of their profits to the empire. They could then carry out business without any startup capital. The system would prove to be incredibly efficient. Kublai Khan, whose youngest brother ruled in Persia, developed a close maritime link with this region of the world. Around 30 years ago, the wreck of a merchant ship from the Song period was found. It was a 24-meter junk. Its frame would have enabled it to sail on the high seas. It was divided up into compartments, which both prevented leaks and balanced the goods being transported. It was carrying pepper from India, which at that time was worth its weight in gold in China. Its holds also contained precious wood from Southeast Asia, which was highly prized for its perfume, and incense from the Arabian Peninsula, used in medicine. Jingdezhen, one of the main porcelain centers during the Yuan period. Its production increased phenomenally under the Song. It was here that the blue flower style was created, using a technique enabling porcelain to be painted with a cobalt blue pigment from Persia. From Guangzhou, it was exported to the west, as far as Egypt. The ruins of Fustat near Cairo are the remnants of a former port city. Excavations have brought to light many fragments of Chinese porcelain, including shards of the blue flower porcelain from the Yuan period. The brilliance of the blue cobalt on the white porcelain was greatly appreciated by the Arab world. Craftsmen from the Near East would later copy the blue flower style. Daidu became Peking. There was intensive activity inside the city. The new capital was now a large city, transformed by the emperor into one of the most beautiful in Asia. There was a lake in its center. Kublai Khan decided to link the lake to the sea with a canal 50 kilometers long. The gigantic building site took several years to complete and employed tens of thousands of men. It fulfilled his long-standing desire to make an impact on Chinese soil and to leave a visible and durable mark. Chinese engineers were immediately confronted with a major technical difficulty: the 37-meter difference in height between Peking and the other end of the canal. They decided to create 10 locks resembling the steps of a staircase. Several remnants can still be seen. Every 5 kilometers along the canal, they built locks with 2 gates. After closing the gates, the level of the water would rise to enable the boats to sail up the canal and supply the capital. Inaugurated in 1293, the capital was named the Bringer of Good Things. It was immediately successful and was frequented by hundreds of boats, not only from southern China, but also from Malaysia and India. A junk loaded in the Persian Gulf could deliver its goods directly to Peking. The Mongolian Empire, linked by land and sea to all Eurasia, could now cement its position as the center of the world. Kublai Khan died in Peking in 1294 at the age of 80. In Turkey, the library of the University of Istanbul has kept a copy of his will. His last wishes were written in Mongolian on the left and in Turkish on the right, the two languages of the Mongolian hordes. They're written on a single page and contain a sentence that summarizes all his thoughts and actions. O my sons, to govern people, do not seek to conquer their bodies, but their hearts. After his death, his empire, stretching from the Mediterranean to the Pacific, was divided up amongst the 4 Mongolian clans. China returned to its isolation. However, another factor may have precipitated the end of the Mongolian era. According to the historian William McNeill, the empire's vast network of communications could have played a part in spreading the plague epidemic from the east to Europe in the 14th century.
It came from the Mongol Empire. It came off the Eurasian steppe. It reached Europe from Kaffa, which is in the Crimea, and then it starts moving by ship. Before that, it's been moving by caravans and other such transport within the steppe world. It's ironic to think that the intensification of communication the Mongols established led to the propagation of plague across the Eurasian world and a weakening of their own position. So it's a very big horizon point in experience of disease for the settled peoples of Eurasia and for the nomads of Eurasia. And it happened because of the new mobility that the Mongol Empire, the Mongol soldiers had on their horses. They could cross long distances in relatively short periods of time and carry infection from places where it had been existing before that time, for perhaps time immemorial, the Yunnan border of China and India, somewhere in there, to the Eurasian steppe itself to Mongolia, Manchuria, and on westward. And that is the transformation that the Mongols brought to the disease distribution in the Old World of very profound significance for the subsequent history of that part of the world.
74 years after the death of Kublai Khan, the Yuan dynasty was handed from power, following successive economic crises resulting from the abusive issuing of paper money. A new dynasty was established, the Ming dynasty. One century later, the geopolitical state of affairs would change. A sailor left Spain for the west, hoping to find India. His name was Christopher Columbus. His discovery opened up new sea routes from Europe to the American continent. The world had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same again. Europe would again become a leading protagonist of history. Christopher Columbus took with him on his travels a book that is now kept in the library of the Seville Cathedral in Spain. Its title, A Description of the World. Its author, Marco Polo. In his own writing, Christopher Columbus had meticulously noted down his comments, remarks, and clarifications as he read. 255 such notes were found. In the margin of one of the pages, an arrow points to the paragraph describing Daidu. The text stated that in the city was found an abundance of products, precious gems, silk, and spices. For over 2,000 years, the reciprocal fascination between Europe and Asia merely expressed each civilization's need to know the other one and to win it over and become richer through contact. As time passed, these two cultures went from ignoring each other to fighting each other, and finally, thanks to a few men such as the Mongolian Kublai Khan, they came together to communicate with each other. These meetings have molded the history of the world. It is said that civilizations are mortal, but this is merely an appearance. Today, there is not a man, place, or thought that does not carry the imprint of each one of them.